Brian, will you do a roll call?
Sorry, Marty, what was it?
Will you do a roll call? Do you want me to call the roll?
I would love for you. No, I'm happy to actually. I'll just say it.
Okay, great. Have a different screen up if we're calling roll.
Okay, I see 6 o'clock. Marty, if you wouldn't mind putting up our slides. Thank you very much. Good evening, everyone. I will call the Missoula City Council meeting for June 28th to order. We continue to meet remotely till we've worked out our hybrid meeting solution. As we've been putting up here in recent meetings, we have the link for the agenda as well as the information about how to provide public comment during the meeting as well as outside of the meeting. If you're a participant in the meeting, you can raise or lower your hand in Zoom. You can click more if you're on an iPhone or Android phone. And if you're on a landline, you can use *9 to raise or lower your hand. And as always, we have our voicemail system that goes to all city council members at 406-552-6012, as well as the city council email, council@ci.missoula.mt.us. And those are available to folks at any point, at all times. Thanks very much. Our first item this evening is roll, and we do have a few folks missing, absent this evening. Those are Councilmember Merritt, Julie Merritt, Amber Sherrill, Jordan Hess, and want to check to see if Stacy Anderson is here. So I believe all members are present with the exception of those three. Somehow I feel like I got that wrong. Let me double check. Yes, that is correct. So all members present with the exception of Ms. Merritt, Ms. Cheryl, and Mr. Hess. Our next item is approval of minutes. We have minutes to approve from June 21st. Are there any changes to those minutes? Seeing none, those will stand approved. And our next item is the schedule of committee meetings, Ms. Raybon.
Okay, let me share my screen here. So next week is the 4th of July weekend, because the holiday falls on a Sunday. City, state, and federal offices are closed on Monday. And so City Council will not be meeting on the 5th of July. So we are setting committee meetings for the next 2 weeks. And here we go. The Public Safety and Health Committee will meet on the 30th of June from 11 o'clock in the morning till 12:10. The Public Works Committee will follow from 2:10 to 2:45. And the Committee of the Whole will meet from 3 o'clock to 4 o'clock. And then on the 7th, that's Wednesday, the 7th of July, the Administration and Finance Committee will meet from 1:50 to 1:30. And the Budget Committee of the Whole will meet from on the 7th from 1:45 to 3 o'clock. And it just dawned on me that I could sure make that a little bigger for everybody. So that's our committee schedule this week.
Thank you. Our next item is public comment on items that are not on the agenda this evening. So we have several items on the agenda, but if anyone wishes to make public comment on any non-agenda item, this is the opportunity, the time to do so. I'm checking to see, I don't see any raised hands on that. And so we will move on to our next agenda item, which is our consent agenda. Go ahead, Ms. Raybon.
Okay, tonight's consent agenda has, I think it's 6 items. Let me look here for sure. Yep, 6 items. The first is to approve claims. Let me turn on my camera here. First item is to approve claims, which are the city's accounts payable. So City Council is paying the bills. This week, we're approving accounts payable in the amount of $930,168.56 for checks that are dated tomorrow, June 29th, 2021. Number 2 has several different parts. It's related to the federal building. Hang on, I'm gonna pop this out because it's long. The first part of it is to adopt a resolution directing the mayor to apply to the National Park Service and take other steps necessary to receive title to the Missoula federal building from the federal government, subject to the conditions and covenants in said application through the Historic Surplus Property Program, and asserting that the city has legal authority, is willing, and is in a position to assume immediate care and maintenance of the property. And then the second part of this motion is to approve the proposed memorandum of understanding between the city of Missoula and Missoula County regarding the acquisition of the Missoula Federal Building. Number 3 is to approve and authorize the mayor to sign an interlocal agreement with Missoula County for the 2021 city and county chip seal projects. Purpose of the agreement is to define roles and responsibilities of both the city and the county for chip sealing several roads in the county. The city's in the county, so it's all in the county. Number 4 is to approve and authorize the mayor to sign a professional services agreement, amendment number 1, to WGM Group Incorporated for the Lower Miller Creek Road reconstruction project at a cost not to exceed $36,405. Number 5 is to appoint Sydney Schweitzer as an alternate member and reappoint Ari Cornelius as a regular member on the Local Emergency Planning Committee for terms that begin on July 1st of 2021 and end on June 30th of 2023. And finally, number 6 is to adopt a resolution of the Missoula City Council calling for the 2021 municipal government nonpartisan elections to be conducted by mail ballot and calling for a primary election on September 14th of 2021 for the following offices: Mayor, Ward 1, and Ward 6.
Great, thank you, Ms. Rabine. Let me ask if there are any questions first from council members, or I'll take questions or comments and then I'll go to public comment. Ms. Vasika.
Thanks. I would like to separate 5.6 and vote on that separately. And may I speak to it as well?
You may.
Thank you. So my colleagues last Wednesday, during last Wednesday's meeting, they mentioned that they are not aware of or concerned about any voter security issues with Missoula elections. And I have to voice my great concern over this, and I'll tell you why. I have not always been skeptical of security issues within Missoula elections. When I ran for election in 2019, the voting mechanism was in person at the polling place or via absentee ballot, where you had to request your ballot be mailed to you. It wouldn't automatically be mailed to you without you requesting it to be done. My election was a very close one. I won by 12 votes. My opponent asked for a recount, which I and others were in attendance for. It was again me winning by those exact same 12 votes. This made me very pleased with the security and the accuracy of Missoula elections because it was in person or absentee ballots only. Then COVID hit and it was all mail in. Even if you did not request a ballot, you were still mailed one. So if you moved and didn't update your voter registration, you would still receive one. If you moved to another county or even another state, you would still receive a ballot at your previous address, even if you didn't specifically tell Missoula elections, because different voter rolls don't communicate like that. So this leads to plenty of concerning discrepancies. In the last election, there were 10,712 ballots that were counted that were mailed to citizens that had not voted since 2014. If you hadn't voted since 2014, that would normally make you an inactive voter. They should not have been mailed a ballot unless they specifically requested one, but they were, and those ballots were counted. That same election, 4,592 other ballots were counted, were missing the affirmation envelopes. You know, those envelopes that say your vote will only be counted if that envelope is there and signed. Those ones were counted anyways, even though the affirmation envelope was not there. Also, there was a nursing home, Hillside Manor, that had 28 affirmation envelope signatures that had the exact same handwriting. These revelations have not had any response nor any answer as to why they happened. So it would be foolish and frankly untruthful to say that there is no election security issues. It would be irresponsible and naive to be in favor of all mail-in voting for this election. Therefore, I cannot support this. I will be voting no, and I urge my colleagues to do the same. Thank you.
And I can see I'm going to regret not moving this to committee reports. Ms. Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just have to point out to Ms. Vasika and others that are listening that the 2019 municipal election was an all mail-in election, just like the 2020 election. All our municipal elections have been all mail-in for the past several years, and the voting fraud claims that you cited have been investigated numerous times and were found to not be credible. There has been numerous election claims brought by and fully investigated by members of the legislature and have been investigated and by the Missoula County elections, and have found to be that our elections were completely above board, following the laws as put out. And you know, your election that you won by 12 votes was an all mail-in election. And so the fact that that was so close, even after a tally, really shows that there is efficacy in all mail elections.
Ms. Jones.
Thanks. I'll just briefly say that I think our elections officer and our elections office in Missoula does a great job. They follow all of the rules. They are incredibly conscientious, and as a result, they get accurate results. And I, for one hot second, do not believe there are any issues there. And I really do not like having a federal narrative that some people are promoting out there being applied in Missoula. And I know that there are certain legislators who are pursuing it. It's completely ridiculous in my mind, and I'm very comfortable with our elections office. And I look forward to this election, both the primary and the full election being mail-in. So I'm in favor of this.
Thank you. Is Mr. Ramos?
Thank you, Mr. President. I will keep it very brief. I am not voting for this simply because I don't think the primaries are necessary. As I stated in committee, there are plenty of countries and cities and states where candidates win without a majority of the vote. They win with a plurality. And as I stated last time, I think that is all that is needed in Missoula for these elections. So I will be voting no on that. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Is there any public comment on any of the items on the consent agenda? I'm not seeing any. I will quickly add, I will be supporting all the items on the consent agenda. I concur with some of my colleagues around full confidence in our county elections administrator and staff and system. And I find it, and I'm not attributing this to Ms. Vasika, to be clear, I find it repugnant that some other members in the state as well as across the country have cast doubt without any evidence on the system and then turn around and bemoan the lack of confidence in the system. They should be ashamed. With that, we will have, we're dividing the question on item 5.6. So we will have a roll call vote on items 5.1 through 5.5.
Okay, on the consent agenda, less item 6, Anderson,
Yes.
Sarah,
Yes.
Santos,
Yes.
Harp,
Yes.
Jones,
Yes.
Ramos.
This is item 5.6, right?
No, this is on 1 through 5.
Yes.
Vasika,
Yes.
Von Lossberg,
Yes.
West.
Yes.
Would any of you like to change your vote? Okay, on items 1 through 5 of the consent agenda, it's 9 ayes and 0 nays, and guess that makes 3 absent.
And I will have a roll call vote on item 5.6.
Okay, on item 5.6, Becerra,
Yes.
Contos,
No.
Harp,
Yes.
Jones,
Yes.
Ramos,
No.
Vasika,
No.
Van Mossberg,
Yes.
West,
Yes.
Anderson.
Yes.
Would any of you like to change your vote? That is 6 yeses and 3 noes and 3 absent.
All right, that passes. We have no comments from city staff, agencies, boards, commissions, authorities, and the community forum. Under special presentations, we do have a proclamation, which I'm very proud to read. This is a proclamation in Missoula County. Whereas Missoula County acknowledges the lasting impacts of the homophobia and transphobia highlighted by acts of physical, mental, emotional, and institutional violence against lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, intersex, asexual, and two-spirit people and communities, both within the United States and internationally. Whereas Missoula County and the city of Missoula have diverse LGBTQIA+ and 2S communities, and are committed to supporting the safety, visibility, dignity, and equality of all our community members. And whereas on June 24th and 28th, 1969, the New York Police Department conducted a pair of raids on Stonewall Inn, a popular gay bar in Greenwich Village, citing anti-LGBTQIA+ and 2S legislation, such as masquerade laws to arrest patrons and workers, And whereas these raids sparked neighborhood resistance known as the Stonewall Uprising, led by transgender and lesbian activists such as Marsha Payetno Johnson, Sylvia Rivera, Stormy, I apologize if I'm certainly going to mispronounce the name, De Larvier, Miss Major, and many other transgender women of color, which served as a catalyst for the movement toward LGBTQIA+ and 2S rights, equality, and equity. And whereas the courage and bravery of these activists in the face of violence served as a catalyst in the United States for greater movement toward LGBTQIA+ and 2S rights, equality, and equity. And whereas while advancements have been made in regard to policy change and equitable treatment of LGBTQIA+ and 2S persons throughout the nation, there continues to be discrimination and violence against people in these communities, making it essential for local governments to collectively show support for community members who are impacted. And whereas June is celebrated as LGBTQIA+ and 2S Pride Month nationwide, and whereas everyone should be able to live without fear of prejudice, discrimination, violence, and hatred based on gender identity, expression, or sexual orientation. Now, therefore, Missoula County and the City of Missoula do hereby declare the month of June 2021 as LGBTQIA+ and 2S Pride Month, signed by the mayor and the commissioners. And any mispronunciations are entirely my fault, and I apologize. We have no public hearings this evening. We do have a couple of items under final consideration. The first of those is the Development Review Capacity Plan and Fee Schedule Amendment. I will first ask Ms. Pan if there are any new pieces of information or any update to the staff report that we received last week.
Evening, Erin Pahan with Community Planning, Development, and Innovation. We have no new updates to the plan to share or no new information since the last hearing, but I'm happy to provide any additional information or answer any additional questions that council might have.
Okay, thanks. So we opened the public hearing, and as has been our process during COVID, we've continued these for a week in most all cases. And so I will reopen or continue the hearing that we opened last week. If there's any public comment on this matter, this is the continuation of that public comment period. And if you're in attendance and would like to provide comment, please go ahead and indicate so. I'm not seeing any. Not seeing any additional public comment for the hearing, I will close the public hearing, and this motion resides in Administration and Finance. So Ms. Jones.
Thank you. I'd like to make the motion to adopt a resolution generally increasing fees for services on the land use and planning fee schedule by 15% to more closely align with the fees proposed as a result of the 2010 user fee study. And I'd like to speak to that.
You may.
Great. This has been a months-long process that our department head, Erin Pahan, has headed up based on a lot of feedback from developers in town, in the building community, that frankly, the Office of Community Planning, Development and Innovation, CPDI, needed to have a quicker process because it was taking too long, and time is money. So there were a lot of discussions and a lot of developer input into this, that yes, they would pay more money for these fees if it meant getting the product quicker through the reviewing city offices so that they could get out there and start building. So first of all, I want to say thank you to Erin for heading up this entire discussion. These are difficult boulders to move, but I think you're doing it. I really appreciate that. Secondly, thanks to all of the developers and builders who were involved, and we have had public comment back from them and feedback during the entire process. So I think this is a very collaborative effort. And third, I'd acknowledge that you can never please everyone. I know some people simply see this as, oh my goodness, a fee is going up, that's a bad thing. But when it's connected to a certain service level, that's the point of this. We want to have faster service so that people can get these turned around and get building quicker, because as we all know, Missoula is in a building boom and there's no end in sight at this point, and we need places to live for many people here. So thanks for all of that. I'm in favor of it, appreciate all of the work, and look forward to voting yes on it.
Thanks, Ms. Jones. Mr. Ramos.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Just wanted to say, first of all, that I greatly appreciate all of Erin's work. I think she's been a super refreshing change and a very needed change to the department. Well, the new department. I can't remember the name of it, but everybody else knows it. Unfortunately, I'm not going to be able to vote to approve this because I haven't seen any evidence or heard anything that has shown or seen anything in the past that shows that more money at something makes anything go faster or makes anything better. I think we've seen that in all areas of American government, where we throw a bunch of money at the problem and it doesn't make it any better. In fact, sometimes it makes it worse. So I hope I'm wrong on this. I truly do. I just understand the fact that of course the developers won't really care if they're paying more money in fees, because they're going to be passing that on to the customers. At the end of the day, they're going to be passing it on to the homeowners. I think that instead of having to employ so many people to review all the materials in the development process, we need to work on how much material needs to be reviewed in the first place to just build a home. I know we've been talking about this since I've been on council. Amending some of the criteria, matching zoning to match the growth policy, so many different things that we can do to reduce this burden instead of having more people there to enforce the burdensome regulations in the first place. So I think that this is addressing a symptom of the disease that is not addressing the disease itself, which I think is overregulation, overcomplication, just an overall process that is designed, not intentionally, but is destined to take a lot longer. So I think until we address that root cause, there's no reason to further exasperate the problem by raising the fees, which adds to the further cause of the disease itself, which is an overburdensome government when it comes to development in our town. Obviously, there's other factors at play, but I think that unfortunately, this is not going to make anything worse, but I certainly appreciate all of the time and effort that Erin has done reaching out to developers and talking to them. And I'm glad that some developers agree with this, but there's smaller developers that I've spoken to that unfortunately it's going to be a lot harder for them when they're trying to compete with the bigger developers when you have the economies of scale where they can offer a price lower for home purchases or for home buyers than a smaller developer can. So it's easier for them to spread out those costs amongst a lot of people when they're doing a lot of volume. But these smaller developers, it's a lot harder for them to spread out that cost with a smaller group of people. So I have a lot of concerns about that. And just the general economic instability of it doesn't make sense with kind of my Austrian view of economics. So respectfully, I'm going to be voting no on this, but I do appreciate the effort and the fact that Erin is spending so much time doing everything she can to make a system better that she came into that was already really, really bad. So she's doing a great job and I appreciate that, but unfortunately I can't vote yes on this. Thank you.
Ms. Hart.
Thank you. When Erin Pahan was hired in this particular role to be the director of this department, I was enthusiastic because what she came to the table with was a career experience in process. And what she was able to do in this process was dissect it and really figure out where the obstacles are. And there are three: staffing, the process itself, as well as zoning code. And she has taken it upon her shoulders to do the very best that she can to, approach those obstacles head on. And it's been a monumental task for decades. And here we have a woman who can actually do this. And she has brought forth recommendations that are both short-term as well as mid-term. And I'm hoping there will come some longer-term solutions if I know her. As a person who is an executive director for a nonprofit in the housing community, I face these very same challenges. I don't have enough money to build. I don't have enough staff to build. And I also face code issues in order to build. And so, Aaron, I really appreciate from the nonprofit sector, and I know my colleagues in the for-profit sector that also are part of one of my teams at Habitat, to be able to come forward and produce some ideas that we can try. And I think this is really critical, because if there's anything I know about you, you are a person who can pivot on a whim and be able to acknowledge that sometimes things don't work and sometimes they do. And when they do, you go full steam. And when they don't, you correct it and try again. So I really appreciate the effort that your whole team has put together on this. I can't wait to get started.
Ms. West.
So I just briefly wanted to say that I fully support this motion. I think that development services does a lot more than just building homes. I think that's a portion of what they do. They also deal with commercial buildings and businesses locating and all sorts of things where people interface with our government. And I think having timely customer service experience is important, and at some point we can't just work better or smarter or keep asking the same people to just do more work. I think this will allow us to really increase our capacity so that everyone who comes to this department for a variety of reasons can get done with what they need to do faster. I just recently spoke to a small business owner who's relocating to Ward 1, and it's been a really long process, and she would gladly pay more in fees if it means that she gets to open 2 months earlier, because that saves so much more money for that business owner than just paying this upfront increased cost. So thank you.
Ms. Becerra.
Thank you. First and foremost, I just want to say that our city departments and our staff does an excellent job of being thorough and diligent when reviewing projects and using the regulations that we have, which are based on state law. So given what we can do with our regulations, our staff is doing an excellent job. We all know the devastating effects of and deadly consequences of not being thorough when you have to review a project, when you have to review a building, make sure it meets code. Most recently, Florida, that devastating situation is an example of what happens when you're not diligent reviewing projects. And so regulations is one part of the equation. The other one is additional staff that's going to be able to meet the growing demands of our community. So, I fully support adding a fee that's going to add more staff so that we can adequately respond to the growing demand that we have for development in Missoula. So happy to support it.
Thanks. Not seeing any additional hands up. I plan to support the motion for many of the same reasons articulated. It's a thoughtful proposal on the part of staff working collaboratively with the development community. I don't think that this would stand a chance of passing if it had been done without that collaboration and express support at some of the prior meetings. And on a lighter note, Jesse and I aren't running for re-election, and I'll look forward to having a beer in the future and talking about, as opposed to throwing money at things in the government, the strategic investments we made in the space program to get to the moon and to get to Mars faster than anyone else. So with that, we will have a roll call vote.
Okay, this is on the resolution for the fee schedule. And let's see, I think we start this round with Hart.
Yes.
Jones.
Yes.
Ramos.
No.
Cheryl. Oh, Cheryl's absent, sorry. Basika
No.
and Lossberg.
Yes.
West.
Yes.
Anderson.
Yes.
Becerra.
Yes.
Contos,
Yes.
would any of you like to change your vote? Okay, let's see here. Oh. Did I call Vasika? I did. Did you vote no?
I voted no.
I thought so. The check didn't take in the software. So I have 7 ayes and 2 nays and 3 absent.
Thank you, and that passes. Our second item under final consideration this evening is a subdivision exemption for family transfer. Tract 1 of Certificate of Survey 6397, located at the corner of Polk and Poplar in the Rattlesnake Valley. I want to start by asking Ms. Gluckin if there's any additional or new information from staff.
No new information. In the past week, we have received additional public comments and issued a memo, and all of those are part of the City Council agenda.
Thank you. And Emily, I think I just butchered your last name. How do I pronounce it?
Gluckin.
Gluckin. Yeah, I don't
Yeah,
know why I'm making
you're
it more difficult on myself than necessary. I thought I had seen a representative of the project. Oh, and that the representative is in the meeting. How do you pronounce his last name?
Nabnett, I believe, but I'll have him correct that.
Mr. Nabnett, I'm going to, in addition to butchering your last name, I'm trying to unmute you. Let's see if you can do that now. Are you able to unmute yourself and join the meeting? I see you in among the panelists.
Hello, this is Stephen Abnett.
Thank you, Mr. Thank you, Stephen. We normally have project applicants and sponsors at either committee meeting or during the hearing, and I just wanted to give you an opportunity if you had anything on behalf of the project that you wanted to relay to council and the public.
Well, I guess I'd just like to say that there was, based on a couple of public comments, that they thought that there was an evasion of the Subdivision Act. And I can understand, I guess, that because I'm a land surveyor and I help clients with subdivisions and exemptions along with boundary work and lots of other stuff, I can understand that they might think that I'm looking for a chance or a way to evade the act. But I've been a registered land surveyor for 30 years and I have never done a family transfer in Missoula County or in any other county. If I was wanting to evade, I would have done a family transfer to my parents or a wife. But I haven't done that. And I'm not evading the act.
Okay. Anything else you want to share? I didn't want to cut you off if I was cutting you off.
No, I'll answer questions if there's questions.
Sure. Yeah, if you could stay on, I want to provide that opportunity. And you actually answered the question I wanted to pose to you. So thank you for being here, which was, did you intend to evade the Subdivision Act? And you've answered that question. While we have you unmuted, are there any additional questions for the applicant from members of council? I'll give you a moment here. Not seeing any. Okay, I'm going to mute you again, but if we get back to some oh, I'm sorry, Ms. Becerra, go ahead.
I was just curious to know how long the applicant has owned the property.
Mr. Nabnett, can you respond to that?
Yeah, I believe I bought it in 2015.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks. Not seeing additional questions. So I'm going to recommence the hearing portion of this. So if there are any members of the public who would like to provide public comment, this would be the time to indicate that you desire to do so, and we'll take that public comment before getting into final consideration. Any additional public comment on this item that we opened last week, had in committee on Wednesday, and then are taking up under final consideration currently? Not seeing any. This item, are there any additional questions from council members? Okay, I've got a couple there. Ms. Vasika.
Thanks. Last week during committee, I mentioned that there were some amendments that I wanted to make. I just wanted to make sure I got to know the proper protocol on how to do that. Do I wait until the motion's on the floor to propose that? Okay.
Yeah, thanks, Ms. Vasika. Once a motion's on the floor, we can do that.
Okay, thanks.
Yep, Ms. Hart.
Thanks, Brian. Is Jim Nugent present tonight?
I believe so. Yes, he is.
Jim, you know, sometimes it seems like over the course of the last few years when we've done these family transfers, they've gone kind of skated right through, and this one, for whatever reason, caught the eye of some folks in our community. And I'm kind of curious, in the decades of experience that you have as our city attorney, how many of these family transfers have been found to be evading subdivision?
The one that comes to mind is up on the west side of the Rattlesnake, and there was two families that were kind of put together, and they were doing several simultaneously, and we ended up in litigation, and the district court ruled in the city's favor that the city thought that it was just too much and that there was an evasion going on. That's the only one that comes to mind, though, with respect to a family transfer.
Okay. Appreciate that history. Thank you.
And I'll ask a question. Emily, if the applicant were to not use the family transfer process, my understanding would be that they would have a minor subdivision review process available to them. Is that correct?
Oh, sorry. That is correct.
And bear with me for a little bit here. And if they were to go through that process, is there anything that you would note or that would come to mind specifically in terms of the considerations around like the type of structures and the improvements and conditions and zoning discussion that we've had that would be materially different than the review we've been going through as part of this? Was that a clear enough question?
I think so. And I'll attempt to answer it. Zoning wise, what they're proposing would be permitted. And if they were proposing that through a minor subdivision, it would likely be allowed to. I guess it's hard to answer this question without considering other stipulations that might come from subdivision requirements, but on the face of zoning, at least, if they were proposing that through a different process, it would still be permitted. I think Mary turned her camera on, so she might be able to answer that a little bit better.
Yeah, Mary, if you needed to chime in, just go ahead and raise your hand. Otherwise, I'm going to move to Ms. Becerra.
I just wanted to expand a little bit on your question, Brian, and I wanted to know if under a minor subdivision, there's agency review that would guide some of the conditions of approval placed on a subdivision after that review is completed. So just curious to know what happens to agency review under a family transfer. Would fire have to provide comment, police, any of those agencies that are instrumental to making sure that this is not a burden on the rest of the community and the immediate neighborhood?
Yes, so through the family transfer process, we send out an agency memo to a pretty large list of city agencies, including fire, police, Parks and Rec, Public Works, city attorney, pretty much anyone that has any relevant information to the project is contacted. So they were given about a 2-week period. I send out a memo, and then if they have comments, they provide it to me in email, and then those get incorporated into conditions if necessary.
Thanks. And Mary, I see you. Go ahead.
Thank you. I was just going to say, in reviewing it with my experience with subdivisions, this proposal would be approvable as a subdivision as proposed. And I think the conditions of approval would be very similar to what we're proposing with this.
Great. Thank you, Mary. Are there any additional questions from council members? Not seeing any. We've had the opportunity for public comment that opened last week, continued up to this point. So I will close the public hearing. This item lives in land use and planning, and Mr. Hess is away. So Ms. West, I believe it is up to you.
All right, so I would like to make the recommended motion, which is to approve the entitlement request for a family transfer subdivision exemption in accordance with MCA 76-3-207B for a division made outside a platted subdivision and Missoula City Subdivision Regulations, Article 8, Section 8040.4E1E. Do you say I don't know. Based on materials submitted in the application packet and subject to the condition of approval. And I'd like to speak to it just briefly.
Go ahead.
So I really appreciate the feedback we've gotten from the community around this family transfer. I think there were a lot of really great thoughtful questions asked, and I really appreciate the time that was spent by city staff, including our attorney's office and Emily and everyone else who worked on creating the memos that addressed a lot of the questions that were raised. I feel like the attorney's office and adequately addressed the concerns around whether or not this was an evasion from going through the subdivision process, and I based on that analysis, I think that this is a appropriate process and should move forward. I also feel that there is predictability in what is going to happen here for the neighbors based on the zoning and the growth policy. I think the most that can happen here is 3 single-family homes, and regardless of future ownership changes. So I think while maybe the neighbors aren't thrilled by this change, I think it's predictable, and I think there's some, I guess, some knowledge of what the future holds for this site. So yeah, there's my motion.
Okay, thank you. That motion's in order. And Ms. Vasika, perfect timing.
Thank you. I would like to propose to amend the motion to remove a few of the requirements, specifically requirement number 1, the no building over 3,260 feet in elevation. Number 2, the right-of-way improvements, and number 6, the requirement of installation of residential fire sprinklers.
So those amendments are in order. Do you want to speak to those?
Yes, especially because this is a family transfer. I don't agree with having so many stipulations and requirement to having just a simple family transfer and you giving your son or your daughter some land. I think that the city, while I do appreciate the work that the staff did for this, I feel like the city is trying to of course, they're trying to get as much as they can out of this review, but I I just disagree with a lot of the requirements, thinking that it's just putting an additional burden on the family to do so.
Thanks. So could you repeat, Sandra, the specific items so that people could, and I'm hoping Emily and Mary are tracking the specific requirements. I want to make sure that they're clear about the proposed amendment. Could you repeat which ones those were?
Yes, it was 1, 2, and 6. 1 was the no building of higher than 3,260 feet in elevation. Number 2, the right-of-way improvements. And number 6, the requirement of installation of residential fire sprinklers. And that one specifically, because they are requiring to put a fire hydrant in nearby, I just don't think, I think they're double dipping and don't really need both.
Okay. Ms. West, I'm assuming, and I think procedurally, we shouldn't accept as, I'm not even going to ask the question. We'll take these up as their own matter. Ms. Anderson.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. I will not be supporting these amendments, and I, especially the fire sprinkler one, even with the new fire hydrant, fire department has said there is not enough water flow. If in the horrible situation that there is a fire in any one of these houses, that they are concerned that there's not enough water flow. And so therefore the need for the sprinkler. I don't think this is double dipping. Nobody makes any money. Our most important purview is health and safety of our community members. Yes, these people may realize what they're getting into, but someday they may sell this house to a family who doesn't know all of the details and want to make sure that in the unfortunate event there's ever a fire, everyone in that household is as safe as possible. That is the #1 goal of our fire department. That is our charge as council members, public safety and health. And if the fire department says that they are concerned, then I take that very seriously. I also think that there needs to be right-of-way improvements, because they're not an island to themselves. They are a part of a community. There's connectivity in our community, and it is appropriate if they're already getting to come through the process as a family transfer, and that is streamlining it. If they were coming through as a subdivision, they would still have to do these improvements. And I think that for the larger community, they shouldn't get special exemption because they're just doing it within their family. We are needing to connect everybody in our community. And so I think that those are all appropriate and is not onerous a part of the city to do so. So I will not be in support of these amendments.
Thanks. Ms. Hart.
Thank you. I would support the first removal of the no building above 3,200 square or 3,260 feet. That one made sense to me, but to the point that Stacy has mentioned about the fire sprinklers and the right-of-way improvements, those I think are important, because even though this is a family transfer, it's unlikely to stay within this family, just like any house. There will be subsequent families that move into these homes in decades ahead, and they're going to wish they had those fire sprinklers or those right-of-way improvements. So I somewhat support your ideas.
Mary, I see your hand up. Go ahead.
So the requirement on condition #1 is to designate it on the amended plat that they will file with their family transfer at the end to create these tracts. And the reason for it is the zoning requires a no build zone above 3,260 square feet in the Woody PUD. So by having it on the plat, it'll make it easier and faster to review a building permit, because we're not going to have to guess where that topo line is. So that was the reason for the condition.
Thanks. Ms. West.
I just had a question for Mary. When was the Woody PUD created?
I am guessing, I think Tim Worley is the one who took it through. So it was pre-2012. I'm guessing 2011, 2010, maybe something like that.
Thank you. I'm also not going to support these amendments, including the first one. I think the current owner of the property was aware of that restriction, I would assume, when he purchased it in 2015, as it was part of the existing zoning.
Thanks. Sandra, go ahead. I'm trying to avoid going twice, but go ahead since you proposed the amendments.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, so I really wanted to appreciate Mary chiming in on that, and because I know that this amendment is not going to pass anyways, I'm not going to amend my amendment. But I appreciate the follow up on that. And I do, one thing I do want to point out is a lot of the discussion on why people aren't supporting my amendment is because of what might happen, that this might not stay in the family. And I don't think that we should make decisions today on what might happen in the future regarding this. So that's all I have to say for this. Thank you.
Ms. Becerra.
Thank you. I just, again, want to say that our staff does a thorough job at ensuring that safety and that all the regulations are met. And we do need to think about what might happen in the future. And that's why we need to be prepared for that based on the regulations that we have in place. And regardless of whether, if this was going under through a minor subdivision, these would be the conditions that would be put on it regardless. So it's not just because it's a family transfer doesn't mean that we have to relax our review of the proposed development. So I would not be supporting it.
Thanks. Not seeing additional hands. I will take public comment if there's any public comment simply on the proposed amendments. Is there any public comment on the amendments? And not seeing any. I'm sorry, I forgot to weigh in. I'm not going to support them either. As Heidi said with the original motion, this process provides predictability. These were known constraints. In the case of the elevation issue, long before the property was purchased, or regardless, it's a known constraint there. The other improvements are very reasonable things that anybody would be subject to under regular development, whether it was exemption or subdivision, minor subdivision review. And I think Ms. Anderson called it not an island to itself. So with that, seeing no additional comment, we'll have a roll call vote on the amendments, the amendment package of the three proposed amendments together. Go ahead, Marty.
I have that as removing conditions number 1, 2, and 6.
You got it.
All righty. And let's start this round with Jones.
No.
Ramos.
Yes.
Basika.
Yes.
Von Mossberg.
No.
West.
No.
Anderson.
No.
Becerra.
No.
Santos.
Yes.
Harp.
No.
Would any of you like to change your vote? That is 3 ayes and 6 noes and 3 absent.
Okay, so the amendment fails. We're back to the main motion. I will, council comments back on the main motion. Heidi spoke to it when she made it. Ms. Jones.
Thanks. I just want to get back to the topic, the issue that had cropped up in public comment on this family transfer was whether or not it was an evasion. And I wanted to note that I read all of the public comment and all of the documentation on this application. And to me, it's pretty clear this landowner has had this for a period of years. The applicant has not done a family transfer in the past. And the applicant does have a son and a daughter living in Missoula currently who are adults. So in my mind, the facts all line up. I would acknowledge that based on our process for these family transfers, it may not have been exactly sequential in terms of how it rolled out, but I do know that there was a consult with the city attorney and there was no findings that indeed this was an evasion of minor subdivision process. So I think it's fine, and I'm in favor of it. I understand that the applicant is a surveyor and is aware of this product, of this procedure, I guess I should call it, that one can use to subdivide or through a family transfer situation, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's an evasion. So I didn't find anything else in there that raised any eyebrows for me, and I am fine voting yes for it.
Thank you. Any additional comment from council members? Not seeing any. So I'll weigh in here. I agree with the way Ms. West characterized this when she made the motion, relative specifically to predictability and then some of the subsequent discussion around what would most certainly be permitted with very much the same, if not identical requirements were we to go through another process. I do want to say and recognize that both Heidi and I received constituent feedback about the process and the merits. Those were shared with all members of council, resulted in some of these the memo and some of this discussion. And I guess I want to be clear that it's entirely reasonable, and I found myself looking at our process and recognizing that it seems like we were a little out of sequential order, as Ms. Jones said, in going through that. I, as a part of this hearing, do not find evidence that this is an attempt to evade. And I would contrast it, I think, perhaps with, a much larger area of land that was within the city limits, something that was the size of a major subdivision out in some part of the community. We're dealing with a lot of development of this sort of size, out to the west of town. And when I looked through our regs around evasion and the process of determining review, it seems to speak to me more to a situation like that, where you're seeing, potential for a lot of homes to go in an area, and there being an attempt to, game the system, so to speak, to forego the necessary review for a subdivision of that size. It's important, I think, to note here that, as Heidi said, there will be 2 homes associated with the son and daughter part of the family transfer, and a third, and I think there might be room for a fourth that was undetermined. These will all comply with the zoning that's consistent with the surrounding community. It complies with the PUD and then the necessary infrastructure improvements around it. So I think that's a long-winded way of saying it doesn't rise to a level to me where I'm concerned about, a 40-unit development that's looking to, evade subdivision review. And regardless, I think we've heard accurate assessment by staff that what would be here, whether it were through the family transfer process or minor subdivision review, would look virtually identical. So with that, seeing no additional comments from colleagues, we will have a roll call vote on the main motion.
Okay, on the main motion, Ramos.
Caught me off guard, yes.
No, we never get this far down in the roll to the R's. Vasika.
Yes.
Von Lossberg.
Yes.
West.
Yes.
Anderson.
Yes.
Becerra.
Yes.
Santos.
Yes.
Harp.
Yes.
And Jones.
Yes.
Would any of you like to change your vote? That is 9 ayes and 3 absent.
All right, and that passes. Is there any objection either from any of my colleagues or from Marty to taking up item 13, new business, first before we get to council comments and mayor comments? I'm not seeing any. So let's go ahead. I know that Chief White has been on, and let's go ahead and move to that. So we'll move to item 13, which is new business. This is a user agreement for tasers and virtual reality scenarios for the police department. Chief White, thanks for being with us. The floor is yours.
Mr. President and Council, thank you. Tasers are an important intermediate force option tool that the Missoula Police Department has had since 2004. So this is not something that's new. It's something that's an ongoing item that the police department purchases every year. In going through our budget requests for the upcoming budget cycle, we reached out to Taser to get a quote because I have 14 tasers that are over 14 years old. I have 18 tasers that are over 10 years old. And both of those platforms have been discontinued by Taser. So we have zero support for them. We can't get cartridges for use in the field. We can't get cartridges to train with. And if anything goes wrong with them, we basically have to shelve them. And we have a remaining inventory of tasers of about 65 tasers that are still functional, about 56 of those. Some of them are upwards of 5 years old, but they're still supported by Taser, and we still have the ability to get cartridges. So in looking at the future, when we were putting together our budget proposal, we went to Taser and asked for a quote. And the quote was for 65 new tasers and a virtual reality program that will allow our officers to use virtual reality goggles to conduct de-escalation training and training with the tasers. This is something new that we don't have. So that is an additional piece, and that is included in that overall price. So you'll see, based on the materials that you received from us, that the entire package is $307,000. I know that's a big dollar figure. And we asked Taser to break it down into a 5-year buyout so we can effectively manage our budget better, so it's not feast or famine. So it's not the department coming every 5 years and asking for a very large amount of money. It is something that is incremental. So the first year is $25,000, and then years 2, 3, 4, and 5 are $70,000. Up until this point, the department has been able to support its Taser program through the use of federal grant dollars. Those federal grant dollars do not cover all of the tasers that we are behind in, and we'd get to a point that we would never be able to catch up based on the cost of the items and being able to make sure that we have tasers going into the future and making sure that all of our patrol officers have tasers. So the ask of council this evening is to allow us to sign the agreement prior to the budget cycle, because it saves us $30,000 if we can sign this contract before July 1st. And going forward, we can discuss the budget items as we work through budget. The tasers are ARPA money eligible, so it is something that we can consider continuing to use federal dollars for and or general fund dollars. So that will be in our budget request coming forward.
Thanks, Chief. Got a queue of questions. Mr. Ramos.
Thank you, Mr. President. Chief White, I just had a quick question about that incremental cost. I think that's a good way to break it out. I know that oftentimes there's a premium paid for kind of parsing it out like that. Was there a premium amount, or did they just straight up allow us to pay it over 5 years?
They just straight up allowed us to pay it over 5 years and allowed it, whether we pay cash for it today or we put it out over the course of 5 years, it's the same price.
That is excellent. And I have a comment, but I'll wait for a motion.
Great, thanks. Ms. Vasika.
Thank you. That was a great presentation, Chief White. What are we going to do with the obsolete tasers? Are we able to sell them to the private market, or do we give them to a different community, or do we have to sell them back to Taser, or do we just destroy them?
We get a trade-in value to be determined.
Oh, okay. Great, thank you. And I guess I'm not too familiar with the new business. Am I allowed to make the motion, or do we have to wait for Ms. Anderson to do that?
Yeah, Ms. Anderson will make it since it comes from her committee. So just hang on for a moment. Ms. Hart.
Thanks, Brian. Chief White, I appreciate you bringing this motion before us. Whenever there's a change in technology, it's always, and then you're stuck with the BlackBerry of the new technology. I'm sure a lot of your staff members are excited to have a new taser. However, that being said, my question to you is, because the technology keeps changing, is there another company that is creating a product that is in competition to the taser? And if so, did you look at that particular product as a possible route to take?
There unfortunately is not another device out there that would meet the high demands in a law enforcement capacity.
Thank you.
Ms. Becerra.
Thank you, Chief. You mentioned that you have about 50 some tasers that are still able to be used. I'm just curious to know, how many tasers do we need? And does every police officer carry one, or do you need a certain number for training operations, or why do we need so many tasers?
So yes, every officer will be carrying a taser. The other piece of this is a little bit of an expansion into our detective division. None of our detectives carry tasers now. So their only force options are their OC spray, their firearm, and that is it. So in order to give our detectives, who are also out in the community and responding to calls and dealing with folks, the opportunity to give them an intermediate force option above the OC spray. So this package will take us to about 125 tasers for the entire department, and we're allocated 116 officers at this point in time. You'll see some budget requests in the future regarding our reserve officer program for doing city council meetings and bailiff duties in the municipal court, and we need to outfit those reserve officers as well.
Thanks. And Chief, I know this is in the information, but could you remind me what the budget impact is in this current, the upcoming fiscal year, given the spread out over time?
Yeah, the upcoming budget year is $24,589.50 to be precise.
Okay. Out of that total, the 300 and some odd.
Yes.
Correct. Yeah. Okay. Thanks. Ms. Anderson, I'm guessing you're going to make a motion?
Yes, I will make the motion, but may I have a quick question first?
You may.
Great. Chief White, could you talk a little bit about the de-escalation training goggles that they are providing? Is that a new thing? It sounds like it from the way you described it, but would like a little bit more information. It doesn't sound like it's a training they have to go to. It's something that they can be doing ongoing here locally, correct?
Correct. So we would get 65 virtual reality goggles to go with the 65 new tasers, and they are programmed to allow us to do various de-escalation training in that virtual environment. So it allows us to program them so officers can learn tactics of, using voice, using other control things besides using a taser. So, or another force option.
Great. Thank you so much.
It also includes suits for our officers to wear as role players. So with inert taser cartridges, so that you're not actually getting tased, but it allows us to deploy a taser onto a person without harming them or causing them to be shocked.
Great, thank you so much. All right, I will go ahead and make the motion. So I move that we approve and authorize the mayor to sign an amendment with Axion to enter into a 5-year agreement for Axion for tasers and virtual reality scenarios for the Missoula Police Department in the amount of $307,357.30.
That motion's in order. Do you wish to speak to it at all, Ms. Anderson?
Yeah, I'm happy to support this motion, and I appreciate the fact that the chief highlighting the fact that this didn't come through normal procedures because there was an opportunity to save the city some money. I think that having non-lethal uses of force are an important component of keeping our community safe, as well as trying to be as mindful of our taxpayer dollars as possible. So the fact that we're seeing this on new business, I think that it's a thorough presentation, and I'm happy to support it and want to make sure that we have all options available to our officers as they're protecting and serving our community.
Thank you, Ms. Anderson. Mr. Ramos?
Thank you, Mr. President. Ordinarily, I don't like voting for things, for additions to the budget when we're about to vote on the budget in the coming months. But in this case, I mean, with what Chief White said about the cost, and I think our first and foremost duty to our citizens is to provide an adequate police force. And I think that we've made a lot of great strides as a body towards criminal justice reform, towards de-escalation, and I think that this is an excellent and very necessary tool. I also appreciate the fiscal responsibility mindset that Chief White has put into this by sparsing it out over the 5 years, and I wanted to thank him for that. And I hope that these tools are put to use and helping our officers be able to do their jobs better in a less lethal way, and I think that it'll do just that. So I'm happy to support the motion tonight, and thank you, Chief White, for a great presentation.
Ms. Hart?
I too will be supporting the motion. Chief White, I guess my one comment to you is that I hope you can incorporate it into the Citizens Law Enforcement Academy. That was a place that I got to experience, and I think it's one of those things that citizens, it's an interesting perspective to be able to put one in one's hands and understand the power that comes with that. So please consider that.
Thank you.
Thanks. Any additional council comment? I want to make sure we take public comment. Is there any public comment on the motion on the floor? If you wish to, this would be the time to indicate you'd like to provide comment. I'm checking the attendees, not seeing any public comment. Seeing no additional comment, we'll have a roll call vote.
Okay, on the motion to approve the contract, Vasika.
Caught me off guard. Yes.
Way down into the alphabet. Yeah. Vasika voted yes. Von Lussberg.
Yes.
West.
Yes.
Anderson.
Yes.
Becerra.
Yes.
Contos.
Yes.
Harp.
Yes.
And Jones.
Yes.
And Ramos.
Yes.
Would any of you like to change your vote? That's 9 ayes and 3 absent.
Great. So that passes. Thank you, Chief White. Thanks for allowing me to go out of order. We'll go back up to communications from the mayor, item 10. I should have indicated at the beginning that the mayor is otherwise engaged this evening, and thus my presiding at the meeting. I will simply urge people to stay safe during this unprecedented heat wave. It's not just uncomfortable, it's dangerous. I would have a lot of comments to make about climate change, but I won't put you all through that. So please stay safe. And with that, I'm going to go to council comments and take you as I see you across the screen. Ms. Jones.
I'll pass. Thank you.
Ms. Anderson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A couple things speaking of heat waves and the upcoming 4th of July holiday, the Missoula County Fire Protection Association is moving our fire danger to high effective tomorrow. So that means, first of all, no outdoor burning season is now closed. No more permits after today. But more importantly, that makes it incredibly dangerous for fireworks. Fireworks are not allowed in the city limits, but even if you're outside the city limits, think whether or not you actually need to put off those fireworks, if it is worth the cost to animals, the environment, health, safety. We are in a drought and we are at high fire levels, and it is not even July yet. And so I just cannot urge people enough to take whatever precautions they need, light off those little snake bombs or do the sparklers or whatever, but keep it at that, and know that hopefully we'll have a cold, wet June next year. And in 2022, you can have a big old fireworks, because it's not worth the cost to our property, to the animals, to our environment. I do not want to have to spend the rest of July hunker down inside because we are choking on wildfire smoke. So please, folks, please, I beg of you to take whatever precautions, be safe this 4th of July. We have lots to celebrate, but do it in a manner that doesn't have ramifications beyond our, out of our control. The firework reporting hotline will be up tomorrow. That number is 258-4850. But again, fireworks are not illegal in the city limits, and just people, please just take all the precautions you can. Thank you, Mr. Von Lossberg, for bringing up the heat. The Poverello Center is asking for donations of water and sunscreen, because there are folks in our community who are unhoused and unsheltered, and they're having to spend a lot of time outside, and this is very dangerous weather. So if you are able to drop off a pallet of water, they would be much appreciated. And then finally, I just want to say, send my condolences to the community of Surfside, Florida. They are still desperately trying to find survivors in the rubble of the collapsed building. And so I know that there are many families who are praying for a miracle. I am joining them in those prayers, and just really, it's a tragedy, and hopefully something that we can all learn from, and hopefully a mistake that will never have to be made again. But it is truly a tragedy, and my hearts and prayers go out to them. Thanks so much.
Thanks. Ms. Becerra.
I just wanted to put out a call for the temporary safe outdoor shelter is in need of tents. Apparently tents are in high demand and very short supply due to supply chains across the country. And if anyone has tents that could be donated, or knows of an agency, an organization that might have some of those, they would be greatly appreciated. Thank you.
Ms. Hart.
It's a common theme. It is hot. And while we take care of our structures and our families, please also make sure to take care of your pets and don't keep them in locked vehicles with the windows up. And also, please take care of our trees and put some water on them, please. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Contos.
I'll pass. Thank you.
Thanks. Ms. West.
I'll stick with the it's hot theme. And I just want to remind people that if you go use our beautiful river, to please pack out any trash and leave it cleaner than you found it. So thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Vasika.
Thank you. First of all, I want to agree with a lot of what my fellow counselors said. It is hot out there. So if you're camping and you have a fire, make sure it's always attended, and make sure that you fully water it and stir it. And if it's cool to the touch, it's safe to leave. If it's hot to the touch, it is unsafe to leave. We don't want to have unnecessary human-made forest fires out there. Also, do take care of your pets. It is 4th of July weekend, so there will be fireworks. So if you're concerned about how your pets might react, call your vets earlier in the week to ask questions rather than Friday evening, and so they don't get bombarded. And last of all, it is Independence Day this weekend. It is a very, very important holiday for all of us. On that day, we are not Republicans, we are not Democrats, we are Americans. We all are in this together. We earned our right of freedom from tyranny and oppression, and we are living together in the peace of America today. So please remember that when you're with your family, even if you disagree on everything, just remember that we are a family, we are neighbors, we are one nation. And happy Independence Day to everybody.
Thank you. Mr. Ramos.
Thank you, Mr. President. I was not going to say anything today, and then I had the distinct honor of having lunch with the mighty Susan Hay Patrick, and she wanted me to remind everybody that tomorrow is the 90th birthday of United Way Missoula, and that tomorrow they're naming their building after their founders, Bill and Rosemary Gallagher. And they're launching a summer full of 90 ways to live united. United Way does a lot of good work in Missoula on community education and so much more. So wanted to give a shout out to them for my friend Susan Hay Patrick. And that will be all. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. With that, we have no items under committee reports. We took care of item 13 under new business. Are there any additional items to be referred? Seeing none. Are there any miscellaneous communications, petitions, reports, and announcements? Seeing none, I thank you for your service. Thank you to those in the public for attending, and we will be adjourned.